One built a family. The other built a church. One promised the apocalypse. The other promised paradise. Both ended in mass death. Both became American legends. But only one of them got what he actually wanted. Tonight, Charles Manson and Jim Jones, two men, two movements, one question: who was truly more dangerous? Welcome to Evil versus Evil. This is episode 1. To understand Charles Manson, you have to understand a child no one wanted. He was born in Cincinnati in 1934 to a 16-year-old mother who, according to legend, once sold him to a waitress for a pitcher of beer. By the time he was 9, he was setting fire to his school. By 13, he was committing armed robbery. By the time he reached adulthood, more than half of his life had been spent behind bars. Prison was the only home he ever truly knew. It was also where he learned his craft, not crime, persuasion. He studied Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. He absorbed fragments of Scientology from fellow inmates. He learned how to read people, how to find the cracks in someone's identity, and how to slip himself into those cracks like water freezing into stone. When he was released in 1967, he walked straight into the most vulnerable population in American history, San Francisco, the summer of love. Tens of thousands of young people, mostly women, mostly running from something, all looking for meaning. Manson did not have to recruit them. They came to him. He gave them what they were starving for: acceptance, sex, drugs, a sense that they were special, chosen, part of something bigger than themselves. He called them his family. They called him Charlie. Some of them called him Jesus. By 1969, around 100 followers were living with him at the Spawn Ranch, an old movie set in the California desert. And inside Manson's mind, a theory was forming. He had become obsessed with the Beatles' White Album. He believed the songs were sending him coded messages. He believed a race war was coming, and he believed it was his job to start it. He called it Helter Skelter. In August of 1969, he sent his followers into the Hollywood Hills with knives. They murdered actress Sharon Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant, along with 4 others. The next night, they killed Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. The killers wrote words on the walls in their victims' blood. Manson's plan was to frame black militants and ignite the war he had prophesied. It didn't work. The killings instead became one of the most infamous crimes in American history. Manson was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death. The sentence was later commuted to life. He spent the next 48 years in prison, denied parole 12 times, and died in 2017, still claiming he had never killed anyone, which, technically, was true. He had simply convinced others to do it for him. That was Manson's power. He did not kill. He created killers. Now meet his opposite. Jim Jones was born in 1,931 inches, a small town in rural Indiana. And from the very beginning, something about him was wrong. As a child, he held funerals for dead animals. He read obsessively about Stalin, Hitler, and Gandhi, studying not their ideologies, but their methods. He preached to other children in his backyard. One former friend remembered Jones killing a cat with a knife just to give it a proper burial sermon. But here is what makes Jones genuinely terrifying. He was not just charismatic. He was, on the surface, good. He genuinely championed racial integration in the 1950s, decades before it was safe to do so. He adopted children of multiple races and called them his rainbow family. He fed the homeless. He built free medical clinics. He preached a gospel of equality and economic justice that drew thousands of sincere, intelligent people into his orbit. This was the People's Temple. And by the 1970s, it was not a fringe cult. It was a political powerhouse. Jim Jones met with Rosalind Carter, the First Lady. He was photographed with Walter Mondale, the Vice President. The mayor of San Francisco appointed him to the city's housing authority. Governor Jerry Brown attended his services. The People's Temple had over 20,000 members at its peak, and Jones could mobilize them as a voting bloc, a protest force, or a private army. But behind the public face, the temple was a prison. Jones controlled his followers through escalating layers of psychological terror. Members were forced to sign blank confessions to crimes they hadn't committed. They were beaten in public meetings. They were sexually humiliated. They were drugged. They were forced to surrender their homes, their savings, their children. Anyone who tried to leave was hunted. By 1977, journalists were closing in. Lawsuits were piling up. And so Jim Jones did what no cult leader had ever done at that scale. He moved his entire operation to the jungle of Guyana in South America and built a compound he named Jonestown. It was supposed to be paradise. It became a concentration camp. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Loudspeakers blared Jones' voice 24 hours a day. Sleep was rationed. Food was rationed. Children were taken from their parents. And every few weeks, Jones would hold what he called white nights, in which he would tell his followers that the end was coming, and they all had to be ready to die. On the 18th of November, 1978, a U.S. congressman named Leo Ryan flew to Jonestown to investigate. Jones had him shot and killed at the local airstrip, and then he gave the order he had been rehearsing for years. 918 people died that day. 304 of them were children. They drank, or were forced to drink, cyanide mixed into a powdered fruit drink. It remained the largest single loss of American civilian life until the 11th of September, 2001. Charles Manson got 9 murders. Jim Jones got 918. Now the question is not who killed more. The question is who, given the same opportunity, would have done more damage. So let's break this down, category by category. Category 1, psychological manipulation. Manson worked intimately, person to person. He could look at a runaway teenage girl and within an hour know exactly which dead relative to invoke, which insecurity to exploit, which version of himself to perform. He was a hypnotist with a guitar. Jones worked institutionally. He didn't manipulate one mind at a time. He manipulated thousands simultaneously, using sermons, sleep deprivation, public confessionals, and pharmaceutical coercion. He turned manipulation into infrastructure. Manson was an artist. Jones was an engineer. The edge here goes to Jones because he scaled it. Category 2, reach. Manson had a ranch, a school bus, and 100 followers in tattered clothes. His entire empire could have fit in a parking lot. Jones had 20,000 members across multiple states, a fleet of buses, a publishing arm, a printing press, 2 airplanes, millions of dollars in real estate, and a private settlement carved out of foreign jungle. He had the ear of the White House. There is no comparison. The edge is Jones by a continent. Category 3, body count. Manson, 9. Jones, 918. There is nothing more to say. Category 4, cultural staying power. This one is closer than it should be. Manson became a folk demon, his face printed on t-shirts, his name invoked in song lyrics, films, novels. He became the shorthand for evil itself. Jones gave the English language a phrase that millions of people still use without knowing where it came from. Drinking the Kool-Aid. Both men are permanently embedded in American memory. Call it a tie. Category 5, survival instinct. Here, finally, Manson wins. He survived. He thrived in chaos. He talked his way through dozens of parole hearings, 12 denials, and 4 decades of prison. He never broke. He never apologized. He never expressed a moment of doubt. Jones collapsed. The moment institutional pressure closed in, the moment a congressman walked onto his airstrip, Jones panicked, ordered a massacre, and put a bullet through his own head before the cyanide reached the last child. Manson would have lived another 20 years in that jungle. Jones could not even survive his own creation. So the categories split 4-1 in favor of Jones. But categories don't tell the whole story. Here is the wild card. What if you switch their resources? Imagine Manson with Jones' machine. Imagine him at the Spawn Ranch with 20,000 followers, millions of dollars, political protection, and a private compound in a country with no extradition treaty. Manson's body count was limited not by ambition, but by access. Give him access, and Helter Skelter is not a delusion, it is a campaign. Now flip it. Imagine Jim Jones with Manson's obscurity. No congressman investigating him, no journalists at his door, no politicians watching him. Jones with the freedom to operate in the shadows. He would not have ended in a single afternoon of cyanide. He would have built something far worse, far slower, and far harder to find. The terrifying truth is that both men were operating below their ceiling. Manson lacked the resources. Jones lacked the privacy. Each one was constrained by the very thing the other had in abundance. So who wins? The verdict. By every measurable metric, the answer is Jim Jones. He killed more. He controlled more. He reached further into the institutions of power. He achieved the kind of total dominion over human life that Charles Manson only fantasized about from a prison cell. Manson was a predator. Jones was a system. But here is the part that should haunt you. Charles Manson looked like what he was. The wild hair, the carved swastika on his forehead, the unhinged courtroom outbursts. Society saw Manson coming from a mile away. The moment he stepped into the light, he was caught. Jim Jones did not look like a monster. He looked like a reverend. He looked like a civil rights leader. He looked like a man you would invite to your wedding, your fundraiser, your child's school. Politicians stood next to him on stage. They asked for his endorsement. They posed for his cameras. And while they smiled, 918 people were being marched toward a vat of poison in his name. The most dangerous people in history are not the ones who wear their evil on their face. They are the ones who wear it under a suit, the ones who quote scripture, the ones who feed the poor, the ones who get invited to the White House. Manson was the serpent. You could see him coming. Jones was the shepherd, and no one saw him at all. Next episode, Ted Bundy versus Jeffrey Dahmer. The charming predator against the methodical monster. Two men who hid in plain sight. Only one of them was ever truly stopped. Until then, remember the lesson of tonight. Evil rarely announces itself. Sometimes it shows up with a sermon and a smile. And sometimes, by the time you recognize it, you have already followed it into the jungle.